August 1st, to me, it's akin to December 1st because it is just 1 month away until you get that joyous day where you unwrap the present of a football season. And here we are, we're starting it. We are at August 2nd as of this evening, and we can't be more excited for the football season to start. We're going to start by giving our wish list on who the best teams in the Big Ten and the SEC are, and then we're going to compare everybody else's toys in the NFC AFC battle for supremacy as far as divisions. My name is Ed Smith, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. Hello, hello, and welcome everybody to the home stretch before football season begins. My name is Ed Smith, and with me today is David Street.
What's up, everybody?
It is that time. It's that time where you just get antsier and antsier to unwrap that present of putting the extra batteries in the remote control so you can flip back and forth from channel to channel to watch all the football all the time. And the girls, let's let them do their thing, for a few months. I'm busy. I've got things to do. There's a game on. It doesn't matter what day, what time. There's a game on somewhere for me to watch. So we wanted to jump in and with really two main divisions in college, conferences in college football, we wanted to rank the top five of both of those conferences because they seem to be the conferences that really outshine everything else as far as conferences in college football as a total. So we're going to start here in the Southeast. That's where we're both at this point, now that Texas is part of the Southeastern Conference. And we're going to start with that conference, and there's a lot of teams to choose from. Of course, we have the Death Star of Georgia. You have your up and comers like Tennessee. But let's take a little bit of a dive and see where we go with the top five. David, who are you thinking in the first couple of slots here?
So if we're going to go from 5 through 1, then in that case, so number 5, if I can count correctly, I have Texas. All right. Number 4, I've got Tennessee. Number 3, I've got Ole Miss. 2, Alabama. 1, Georgia. I think you described Georgia perfectly. They are the Death Star of college football. They've got the best coach. I mean, now that Nick Saban is retired, Kirby Smart is far and away the best coach in college football right now. They've got the best quarterback. Carson Beck's probably going to be the number 1 draft pick in 2025. They've got the best lines. I mean, really, Georgia has the best roster overall. There's no questioning that. And I think what's really interesting, Ed, is that, under Kirby Smart, Georgia has been known for having defenses that are elite and offenses that range from very good to great, but, not necessarily elite. Like when Georgia won back-to-back titles in 2021 and 2022, they were led by defenses that were elite and offenses that weren't necessarily elite, but they were still very, very good, right? I mean, certainly good enough to complement their defenses. Could we, for the first time in the Kirby Smart era, be seeing a Georgia team where they're actually going to be elite on offense? Like, I think Georgia could potentially be a top 3 scoring team, especially with the way that Carson Beck should pan out to be. Could we be seeing a Georgia team that is elite on offense and still great on defense, but not necessarily elite on defense like we're so used to seeing from them?
I think we are. I'm on the opposite side of you as far as Georgia's offense. I think when you lose Brock Bowers and Lad McConkey, as your two main targets, you're going to take a step down. You're not going to replace that level of athlete, at least in the beginning. There is certainly room for improvement as you go through the year, but I think that makes Georgia a little more vulnerable. They're still number one in my book, and I'll get to my list here in a minute. But there's that one inkling of these are not the absolute best people on the field all the time, no matter who you're playing, as far as the Georgia team. On defense, yes, they are. They are still elite as far as a defensive unit. But on offense, they've got to figure some stuff out. And it makes it easier having somebody like Carson Beck, who ran the offense last year, gaining some continuity for bringing in the replacements of those star players on the outside, to figure out how this offense really comes together. And that's really what those first couple of games are for in any schedule, whether it be in the NFL in preseason or those first couple of non conference games in college. Having the offense kind of figure itself out, because no team hits the ground running when it comes to the start of a season. So that's that's the only thing that I would push back on for you, David, as far as the Georgia offense. It could wind up being elite toward the end of the year, but at the beginning, they're going to have to go through some missteps to figure out how they get to that elite status.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point in losing Brock Bowers and Lat McConkey to the NFL draft, and obviously the dismissal of Ra Thomas. But the way that I'm looking at it is Carson Beck, I think, should project to be a quarterback who is just going to elevate everybody around him. And, it kind of reminds me of Joe Burrow, one of the I mean, as hard as this is to say, like one of the very few knocks, quote unquote knocks against Joe Burrow was that he was surrounded by just he was surrounded by talent everywhere, and that is true to a degree. But we also have to remember that a lot of those same guys, guys like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, the year before that, they didn't their numbers weren't nearly as elite, the year before that, and then their numbers skyrocketed to elite, and that was in large part, thanks to Joe Burrow. I mean, like nobody, not even diehard LSU fans in their right minds, could have predicted LSU to have the historic offensive season that they had. Uh, I'm looking at Carson Beck the same way. I acknowledge the pieces that they lost on offense, but I think Carson Beck will. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Joe Burrow was in 2019. But I am saying that I think he's going to possibly have a Joe Burrow-esque year where his play is just so elite that it just elevates everybody around him.
And that's absolutely true. The biggest thing that is going to help that is that offensive line, which is full of dump trucks that are that are going to just mow people down all the way down the field. Because in in their core, Georgia is a running football team. So how do you do that? You run people over, you run behind those guys, and you play action pass off of it. That opens up a lot more of the passing game so they can get that continuity going with them. So I'm right there with you on that. Now, you said at number two, you had
Alabama, and large reason being, Jalen Milroe. I mean, even though Saban is gone now, that's still an elite roster in the SEC. And Jalen Milroe, talk about a guy who truly got better as the season progressed last year. I don't think he's going to be as good as Beck, but Jalen Milroe also runs a different style since Carson Beck is more of a pro style pocket quarterback, and whereas Jalen Milroe is more of a dual threat guy. So ultimately, that is the biggest reason why I have Alabama number two is because of Jalen Milroe. Simple as that.
I don't disagree with that. Uh, Jalen Monroe, he has a great, pretty looking long throw, but he realized his biggest strength was his legs last year, and I think that is going to be difficult to get him out of that mindset and into that passing offense that Kalen DeBoer is bringing in. But as for number three,
Let me check. I believe it's yep, Ole
Ole
Miss.
Miss.
And for me, it's simple. One, Jackson Dart. And by the way, there was a rumor that Jackson Dart tore his ACL, I think, but that's what that was. That was a rumor. I believe Jackson Dart should be fine. So ultimately, it's Jackson Dart, but it's also because Ole Miss has the best transfer class according to 24/7 Sports, not just in the SEC, but in all of college football. So you take Jackson Dart and you take an elite transfer class, and I think you have the makings of a top three SEC team.
Okay. Okay. And I'm with you as far as the Jackson Dart thing. And I think the continuity in the coaching with Jackson Dart certainly makes them more formidable. And for me, that's going to jumble up my list a little bit.
Hmm.
And you had Texas at four?
No,
Oh, you
I
had
actually
Texas
have
at five. You had
four.
Tennessee?
I have Tennessee at four, Ed, and I think Nico is going to be a freaking stud. I mean, I, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, there's a reason why There's a reason why he's projected to be a great player. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's top 10 in Heisman odds. I mean, the dude's going to be a stud. I hate to say that as a Florida fan. You know, I don't know how Tennessee is going to do overall. I think Tennessee should have a fairly decent season. I see, 9 to 10 wins on that schedule, but individually, Nico Stud.
If you want to call him that.
I mean, he is going to be a stud, right? And I know a lot of Tennessee fans were pushing back against Josh Heupel about like, well, why are you starting Joe Milton over Nico, right? When Nico clearly is more talented. And I did not have a problem whatsoever with how Josh Heupel handled that, situation. I've talked about it before on the show, that not everybody is a Trevor Lawrence. Not every five-star quarterback is able to impact the game of college football right away. And in fact, if anything, I've seen more five-star QBs ride the bench in their first year and then show up later. So
Sure. And with that offense that I still keep wanting to call him Bobby Hill, but um, uh, that Heupel's running in Tennessee, I think it plays to his strengths that we've seen. That's one of the things about Nico that we've seen so far is he's been allowed to play some, so we've been able to see some of what we should anticipate as he takes over the team as a full time starting quarterback.
And I think, yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing you have to consider is you look at the other side of the ball, and Tennessee might have arguably the best defensive player. And what's his name? James Pierce, I think.
Yeah, the defensive end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So Texas next on my list.
Okay.
And it's just kind of the same thing. Same theme with quarterbacks. Something, Ed, and I thought about this earlier. Does it feel like Quinn Ewers still has something to prove?
Absolutely, he does. He's he's been injured the past two seasons. He sat out at Ohio State and and being injured the past two seasons, where he missed significant time in the middle of the season against a schedule that wasn't as good as what Texas was facing. I mean, equally competition. Texas was clearly better than them as from a roster and team building standpoint, but they they struggled without Quinn Ewers there. So they almost lost to Kansas State last year uh, in that thrilling game, and the year before they wound up losing to Alabama at home after he got knocked out after just shredding the Alabama secondary in the first half of that game. So, absolutely, Quinn Ewers does have something to prove going into this year because not only does he have to prove it, he also has to prove that plus that he is better than who's sitting behind him. And that is the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've named my top five, but you also had 7 teams listed. So do you want to hear my 6 and 7 teams?
Sure.
All right. So number six, I have Missouri, and then number seven, I have LSU. The reason why I have Missouri over LSU is because of Brady Cook just simply being more proven than Garrett Nussmeier.
Hmm.
And listen, I think, I posted about this on Twitter, and I got quite a bit of pushback from LSU fans. I don't think LSU fans understand just how big of a drop off they're going to have at quarterback now that Jaden Daniels is gone. They're saying things like, "Oh, Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a stud," and I understand you have to hype up your quarterback, but I stand by everything that I said in my tweets, and I stand by everything that I'm going to say right now. All right, Ed, and I don't know if I've said it on this show, I don't know if I've said it with you before. I have explained it with Shelton from High Top Sports. But I'm saying that if you look at the recent history of LSU football, okay, they they don't have consistent quarterback success. And what I mean is they're not like Ohio State, where a program like Ohio State just produces elite quarterback after elite quarterback after elite quarterback, with the one exception being Kyle McCord. And I don't think Will Howard is going to be elite either, although he does have some stud skill players, so maybe that could elevate him to be elite, right? You look at LSU recently, and the only elite quarterbacks they've had, at least in my lifetime, like the only great quarterbacks they've had are Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels. And one LSU fan was arguing against me, saying like, "Oh, you really expect quarterbacks to develop well under Les Miles?" Okay, fair, but you look at Brian Kelly, and I'm curious, Ed. Other than Jaden Daniels, what I mean, Jaden Daniels is the only quarterback that Brian Kelly has had in Baton Rouge, in fairness. But
Hmm.
when he was at Notre Dame, what elite quarterbacks did he have at Notre Dame? I don't remember who the quarterback was in 2012 when they went to the national championship, but Notre Dame's offense was not that good. So obviously, whoever the quarterback was back then was certainly not great. But again, other than Jaden Daniels, what elite quarterback has Brian Kelly had?
Brian Kelly's calling card has not necessarily been big time quarterback play.
Hmm.
Uh, he's had good quarterbacks that he's made better, but the rest of the athletes around him have been who you think about because he's the one that brought in Travis Kelsey into Cincinnati. He's the one that brought um,
I, I actually,
Manti,
I actually did not know that. That's an interesting fact.
Manti Te'o into Notre Dame. So he's had that one or two really high end piece. The thing that we've always concerned ourselves with Brian Kelly in the SEC is you're not going to get by with one or two really good pieces on this schedule. You are going to have an entire roster full. You're going to have the depth. And can you recruit the depth of that level of athlete onto your team that you only had one or two of at your previous stops? So that's always the big question with Brian Kelly. It isn't necessarily do they have has he had elite quarterbacks? It's has he had enough elite athletes on his roster to
Yeah.
make the push that he would necessarily need to have to make a splash in the SEC?
Do you agree or disagree with my assessment about Garrett Nussmeier when I used the fact that LSU does not have consistent quarterback success over the years? Do you agree or disagree with that assessment?
It's been somewhat inconsistent, but that doesn't mean that he is going to be somebody that suffers from inconsistency. That's where I would go with that because he's an unproven commodity at this point because Jaden Daniels went nuts last year. And Nussmeier was in the running to get the starting job last year, but Jaden Daniels proved himself to be that much better. And there was no looking back at that point because you're not going to do a two QB system if one has proven to be that much better than the other one, unless you're Texas with Major Applewhite and Chris Sims. Uh, so uh, that's where I would put Nussmeier as unproven, but not inconsistent because we haven't seen him enough to know if he's consistent or inconsistent. I don't want to put that on him yet.
That's fair. One thing I want to tackle, I want to ask, real quick before we move on, and that speaking of Jaden Daniels, Ed, does it feel like the future for quarterbacks who stay with their programs from day one? Does it feel like their future is a little murky because you look at the quarterbacks who've have stolen the spotlight and who have won the Heisman? Caleb Williams transfer, Jaden Daniels transfer, and my gosh, I literally had one other guy, but I can't even think of
Michael
his.
Penix Jr.,
Yes, I wasn't thinking of him, but that is also a good example.
Bo
Uh,
Nix, Dylan
yep,
Gabriel.
yep, and Justin Fields transfer from Georgia. There was one other guy that I can't think of him right now, but obviously you get my drift.
Yeah, it's we live in a college football world where if somebody just has the slightest inkling that it's not going to work out for them at one place, or they think another place is going to develop them more so than where they wind up going to start, then they're going to go.
Hmm.
They're just going to take off and leave.
Oh, by the way, it was Caleb Williams that I was thinking of. And
Yes,
you know what?
yes.
Throw Joe Burrow in there as well.
Well, Caleb Williams went to USC because Lincoln Riley went to USC.
Fair, but
So
still a transfer.
and he was still a transfer,
Yeah.
but so was his coach. So there's that. Um, so overall, if you see a player that knows that he's going to develop and knows it is that he is going to have his opportunity, then you may see more stay. But when you get below that elite level of player development programs, that's where you're going to start to see the chaos
Yeah.
really shine as far as quarterbacks going everywhere.
And you look at go ahead, finish your thought.
I was going to say Riley Leonard going from Duke, which is not an elite program for development, and especially after Mike Elko went to Texas A&M, going to Notre Dame, and the year before Sam Hartman going to Notre Dame. Those are those are moves that are about the quarterbacks wanting to develop and still have an opportunity to play at a high level
Yeah.
because the programs that they have been playing in are somewhat middling, if you will, and want to see what it's going to look like when they can develop and be with better athletes that are more on their level rather than trying to pull everybody up to their level.
Yeah, and talking about transfer quarterbacks, I mean, that's something that could potentially happen with my team. I mean, I pray that it doesn't happen, but DJ Lagway, second stringer behind Graham Mertz, I mean, he grew up a Gator fan, but he also absolutely loves Billy Napier. Like, he speaks very highly of Napier, and I'm telling you, if Napier gets the axe this season, then Lagway is leaving. Okay, because it doesn't matter that he grew up a fan. Personal relationships matter, especially in college football. And as I said, Lagway loves Napier, so if Napier is gone, Lagway is going to be gone too. I hope that doesn't happen, but I fear that it could potentially happen.
Yeah, I it happens both ways because you take a look at somebody like Noah Fafita at Arizona when Jed Fish went to take over the Washington job after Kalen DeBoer left. Noah Fafita had that option to go follow the coach that installed the offense that made him a star last season, but he decided to stay at Arizona because that's where his personal relationships were strongest. And it wasn't all about, let me follow the coach that made me a star so he can make me a bigger star. Now it's, let me make myself a bigger star without that coach and see what that looks like.
Definitely a rare breath of fresh air. Yes.
Absolutely. Now, to go back and take a look at my top five, I'll start at number one. And no surprise here, we're at Georgia. Shay, you know, we're bet buds right here.
Yes. Yes.
It's
They're,
um,
they're the Death Star.
they are, and it. unless one of these other teams gets into their exhaust port and blows it up from the inside, then
We
they're number one.
we all thought college football was going to get better after Saban retires, and then it gets taken over by a dude with a bowl cut, and whose name is
It,
Kirby.
it's like the first order after the Empire.
So you're
It,
saying that Saban's going to come back?
yeah, exactly. So uh, at number two, I'm going to have Ole Miss. I think for the reasons that you stated, with Jackson Dart, with all the transfers, even losing his main weapon on offense, Quinshon Judkins,
Mhm.
they still have their coach, the coach's name.
Lane
Uh,
Kiffin.
yeah, they still have Lane Kiffin's mind with Jackson Dart's ability to run the offense with more talent and better athletes coming in for that 1 year rental, if you will, to just make the push to get over the top. I think the consistency in the program to bring those players in is a big reason why I have them at number two, whereas you had Alabama. I think Kalen DeBoer being a, the first year in that school with that roster, there are some question marks, and we'll get to that in a second.
I definitely don't disagree with you, Ed, per se. But like, even without Saban, I just, at least not yet, I cannot in good conscience put Alabama outside of the top two, because that's just the kind of brand that they've built for themselves. That's the kind of reputation that they've built.
Sure, sure. And the school built the reputation, but the coach built the reputation for the school.
Well, no, I that is also true, because people forget that Alabama was average at best before Saban got there. Who was the coach before? Not Don Shula, Mike Shula
Mike
was.
Shula, yeah,
Yeah, and he
he,
was
who went from being an offensive coordinator in Cincinnati for the Bengals
yeah.
to coaching Alabama, and that didn't work out so well.
And Alabama, I hear Alabama fans say all the time that they do not acknowledge that era whatsoever. That era did not happen.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like if the Yankees miss the playoffs, for 3 years, then they're going to go get a new manager
Hmm.
because that's the standard. And at Alabama, the standard is winning. And they
Absolutely.
just weren't doing it at a high enough clip to consider themselves winning. So they went out and got Saban, who is a winner. Um, so number three, we're gonna get a little wonky here. At number three, I'm gonna have Texas,
Oh, I
and
thought with the way the conversation was going, I thought for sure it was going to lead into you saying Alabama is number three.
nope,
All
I'm
right.
gonna have Texas. I'm a big believer in consistency of culture. So, and I've said that many times on this show that winning starts at the top, and then it trickles down to the rest of the program. And with Texas right now, Sarkeesian, Chris DeLaconte, uh, Chris DeConte, CDC, uh, they those two have such a congruency with how this program is being run that trickles down into every last aspect of the program. And not only did Texas have 11 players drafted in the NFL draft last year, they replaced every single one of them with somebody that could potentially be just as good, is just as good, or could be better. And that is something that we are seeing in on the 40 acres right now that we hadn't seen before Steve Sarkeesian came in. We had those two, like you were saying, Alabama fans don't recognize the Mike Shula era. We don't recognize the Charlie Strong era, uh, and most of the Tom Herman era. So when you've got the best quarterback room in the country, in my opinion, with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, which Arch Manning's not going anywhere. Everybody can just be quiet about it. He knows he's being developed to play in the NFL, and he's going to have this team to himself as of next year. which is actually a really great lead in for him. They get CJ Baxter, who was a freshman last year, but wound up being their number one running back after Jonathan Brooks went down. And Jaden Blue, who was their number three running back last year, he moves into the number two slot. They went and got Isaiah Bond, the receiver for the 4th and 31 from Alabama. And they have some lines to replace Jatavian Sanders at tight end. Not going to be as dynamic, but certainly going to be consistent. And that's really something that you want to have. And David, let's be honest, we're splitting hairs here.
Mm-hmm.
The top end of the SEC is essentially the the top 10 of college football.
Yeah,
So,
for
however you want to jumble them up, you take a look at the rosters, you take a look at the schedules, you take a look at the coaching staffs. Though every little bit matters when looking at this stuff, and that's what
yeah.
makes this so fun. That's why we're so excited. We're waiting for Christmas morning. Uh,
By
but you're absolutely right. Alabama, I do have at number 4.
by the way, before we do get into Alabama, Ed,
Yeah.
this is something that I just thought about, and that when you're talking about Arch Manning, um, is Arch Manning like an extremely rare case of someone who was an elite 5-star quarterback in high school who's not even going to start until his third year? I mean, I look at Jameis Winston, 5-star quarterback in high school, fairly certain he started during his second season with the team. Tua Tagovailoa, I know he started with his. He started in his second season with the Tide. DJ Lagway, if all goes well for Florida, will certainly start next year, and that'll be his second year. Arch Manning is an extremely rare example of someone who was an elite quarterback in high school, but is not even going to start until his third season with the team.
And that's the comfort that he has being both a Manning and being with somebody that ran offenses in the NFL. He knows that's his projection. He knows that there's not going to be many other places that he can go that can give him a better projection than what he's at right now. So why throw caution to the wind? Why ruffle a bunch of feathers? Why whatever analogy you want to use on that? But Arch Manning, he's in the right spot. He's gonna get his time in the sun, and it may be for just 1 year, which there's nothing wrong with that. But he's going to have his time. He just has to be patient. And as you go through this year, considering Quinn Ewers' injury history, he may have an opportunity to go ahead and play this year because of that injury history.
Yeah,
So that, as I mentioned before, that was Texas's almost downfall last year, not having the quarterback that was really ready to lead the team the way they needed to be led against teams that were good, but maybe not as good as what they should be themselves. So we all so the loss almost came in that early November matchup against K State.
yeah, absolutely.
Number 4, I'm going to put Alabama there. As I mentioned, the fact that Kalen DeBoer is starting a new program after the guy, which you never want to be the guy after the guy, and installing a whole new offense with a quarterback that found his legs, but I want to see how accurate he is down the field, which Michael Penix Jr., he was an NFL ready quarterback with accuracy down the field. Jalen Milroe, he throws a pretty deep ball. I want to see how well he can throw that intermediate and those touch throws, those throws that you don't have to jam it in there or you don't have to bomb it. Those intermediate uh, throws that DeBoer's offense asks you to do, as well as read defenses for it. So I'm a little cautious on Alabama. That's why I have them at 4. It's because I'm being cautious more than anything else. I At number 5, I'm gonna have Tennessee. I'm with you. I think Nico's gonna be the guy. Heupel being a quarterback himself in a system that he developed, in an offense that he developed himself, I think is going to pay dividends quickly for Tennessee. But I don't know if it's going to be a top 5 in
Hmm.
the country type advancement that you see with Nico. He's going to need some seasoning, and we'll see how quickly that seasoning turns into a delicious meal. As far as those other two teams that we were talking about, Mizzou and LSU, I feel more comfortable with Missouri's schedule
Oh
to
yeah,
put them at 6.
Missouri's
Uh,
schedule is pathetically easy, man.
it is. They go Murray State Racers,
Win,
Buffalo Bulls,
win,
Boston College,
win,
Vandy,
win.
Texas A&M,
Probably a win.
UMass,
Win,
Auburn,
win.
at Alabama,
Loss. I'll give them a loss there.
Oklahoma at home,
Win. I'll give them a win.
at South Carolina,
Win,
at Mississippi State,
win,
and home for Arkansas.
win. So they could potentially go 11-1, all because their schedule is so pathetic.
And with Braden Cook uh, being that consistent leader, and Drinkwitz built a team that is centered around the offensive and defensive line, and that is what pays dividends in the SEC. So there you go.
Hmm.
I've got them at 6 for that reason. With LSU, the Nuss Bus, they've got a fairly, I'm not going to say simple schedule, but it's right on par. Uh, the
Hmm.
fact the fact that they start with USC, uh, then they have Nichols, they have South Carolina,
So
UCLA,
4-0 so far, I'd say.
South Alabama,
Win.
Ole Miss, loss.
Yep, that's a loss. So is that 5-1?
Yep.
Okay.
Arkansas,
Win.
that's a win. At Texas A&M, at Caulfield.
Uh, I'm gonna say
Depends on how Connor Wegman is. That
yes.
that entire program is going to be
Hmm.
based on how his development is under Elko.
Yeah.
Um, Alabama at home, that's 2 losses for sure. Uh, then you have at Florida, at the Swamp.
I mean, they're LSU's probably going to win because they've beaten us 5 years in a row, man. But we have a huge advantage at quarterback this year over LSU. But I'll still give LSU the win for now because they've had that advantage over us for the past few years.
Vandy,
Oh,
win,
that's a win.
and Oklahoma.
Probably a
That,
win. So that's what 9-3, 10-2.
yeah, 93, 10, and 2
Yeah,
is so that's why I've got them at that 7 slot. I
yeah.
mean, can one of the other teams behind these 7
Hmm.
jump up? Absolutely, they can, but that's the fun of this.
Well, the thing too about LSU, Ed, is that while 9-3 or 10-2 would certainly be a great year, yes, you also have to consider the context of I think Brian Kelly said that he wanted LSU to be a champion, like to win a championship or be a championship contender, by year 3. And yes, with the expansion of the playoff format, 10-2 could absolutely make it, or maybe even 9-3, depending on how chaotic things get. Right, but let's say they do go not 9-3, and those 3 losses are what leaves them out of the playoffs. Right. Well, then it's kind of disaster, right? Because you're taking Brian Kelly, who said that he envisioned LSU to be a championship contender by year 3, and then year 3, if they miss the playoffs, he's going to have a lot to answer for.
Yeah, he will. But that's what he asked for coming to the SEC and not
True.
sticking with Notre Dame, who doesn't have a conference allegiance that he needs to worry about. They can build their own schedule outside of the quasi ACC model.
And
Um,
LSU still needs to prove itself on defense too. I mean, we haven't talked about that.
oh, they are. garbage. They were garbage last year,
Yeah,
and I don't know if we see them get better, but they can't get much worse.
yeah. I mean, and Ed, I've talked about this before, but for whatever odd reason, every single year LSU's, well, maybe not this year, but most years LSU's defense gets hyped up to be elite. And yeah, sure, on paper they are elite, and they have produced some studs over the years. But truth be told, LSU has not had an elite defense since 2011. I mean, it's been well over a decade since LSU last had a truly elite defense.
Yeah, and the defense that they carded with their national championship run, they didn't have to be elite. They
No,
had to be serviceable.
they were,
And you know what? If they were serviceable last year with Jaden Daniels at quarterback, they
yeah.
would have won double digit games and we wouldn't have talked about them so badly
The
and had such a
2019
question mark as far as Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman.
yeah, the 2019 defense was bend but don't break. And if that was the case last year, I think LSU absolutely could have won the championship. I mean, it is a crime against humanity the way that LSU's defense wasted a historic season from Jaden Daniels.
Absolutely, they did. But we had mentioned schedules, and there's been a lot of talk about, oh, Texas' schedule is easy. I don't think so. I do not see the last two national champions on anybody else's schedule in the SEC. So there is that.
Okay,
But
fair.
I digress. Well, one second. We know Florida's schedule is going to be murderer's row.
Worse than that, probably.
Uh, but I just want to take a second and look at Alabama's schedule because Alabama is playing every team that we just talked about outside of Texas. They,
True.
I actually, and Ole Miss. So they wind up going to Wisconsin. They get Georgia at home. They go to Tennessee, which we all know what happened last time they went there. They go to LSU. They go to Oklahoma, which is going to be a lot harder than what people think. And then you have the Iron Bowl at the end. I don't think that's an easy schedule. That is not a walkthrough for this roster trying to get its feet under itself with a new coaching staff. So that that is something to I'm not say be worried about, but just keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple things. One, with Michigan, we have to consider the fact that Michigan caught lightning in a bottle. I mean, it was a perfect storm for them. Everything went right for them. They had veteran leadership. They played a really really easy schedule, and they're still going to have an easy schedule. Well, does Michigan have an easy schedule? We can check on that later, but I don't think they have the advantage of the veteran leadership that they had last year. And plus, Jim Harbaugh is gone. And you're right, Alabama does have a tough schedule, Ed. And the game against Georgia, that's going to be in Tuscaloosa, right?
Yes, it is.
So, okay, but I have to say, Ed, even despite that, I think Georgia is going to kill Alabama. Like, this is going to be extremely bold, but I think Georgia is going to beat them like, 38, maybe 41 to 17. I acknowledge that could backfire on me very easily, man. But I think just without Saban and Kirby Smart is a very vindictive person, and he loves running up the score on people. I think he's going to have his way with Alabama that game.
And it's you'll get no argument from me. That's really where that boils down to. But since we did talk about Michigan, let's transition into the Big Ten conference here. And I don't want to. I don't know if we want to spend as much time because uh, these are pretty set in stone, really, as
Yeah,
far as top fives. Because there's when it comes to the Big Ten, it's been top heavy and bottom heavy. It's been unbalanced over the past few years, in my opinion. Do you feel the same way?
yeah, I do. I get what you're saying, and like we did before, I want to go ahead and list off my top five, and
Go ahead.
yeah. bottom up before, but I'm gonna start at the top this time. I have Oregon at number one. I think Dan Lanning has, the way that Dan Lanning has instilled toughness in that team. I think they're a perfect fit in the Big Ten. Now, here's the thing with Oregon. Okay, I don't think Oregon has the best roster in the Big Ten. I think that's Ohio State. I do think Oregon has the second best roster in that conference, though. But while Ohio State has the best roster, I think Oregon has the best quarterback. And to me, I am always going to take the second best roster with the best quarterback over the best roster with the quarterback who I don't know. I don't even know if he's going to be top two or top three in the conference. So I think Dylan Gabriel is that major difference maker, for the Ducks, and that's why I put Oregon overall over Ohio State.
Okay.
And I think I just gave it away. I have Ohio State at number two.
Okay.
So as I said before, I think Ohio State overall has the best roster in the conference. Will Howard, I think he's decent. And certainly, I think Will Howard has the weapons around him to turn him elite or make him have an elite season. And listen, the excuses are over for, Ryan Day. I mean, Jim Harbaugh has been kicking his ass over the past few years, but Jim Harbaugh is gone. I think Michigan is going to take quite a bit of a step back. The excuses are over for him. I mean, if he loses to Michigan this year, the only thing that will save Ryan Day's job is maybe not winning the Natty per se, but at least making it to the Final Four of the college football playoffs. Because if he loses to Michigan and doesn't at least make the Final Four of the playoffs, Ed, I think Ryan Day is gone. What do you think?
If he doesn't beat Michigan, he has to win the national championship.
I think that's fair too, for sure.
Simple as that. Who do you got at number 4?
Uh, who do I have at number four? Wait, that was number two, Ed. I think you
Okay.
mean
So number 3.
yeah. Okay, so number one, Oregon. Number two, Ohio State. Number three, got Penn State.
Okay.
I thought Drew Aller had a decent season last year. I mean, I know he didn't really perform the best against the best teams that Penn State played, but 25 touchdowns and two interceptions uh, speak for itself. So I got Penn State at number four, or excuse me, Penn State at number three. Michigan, I have at number four. I think even though Michigan is going to take a bit of a step back, I don't think they're going to take a massive step back. I think they're still going to be a top team in that conference. So give me Michigan, and then you know what? I'll name the other ones. Iowa, I think that would be number five. One, two, three, four. Yeah. So I got Iowa number five, USC number six. The reason why I have Iowa at number five, the reason why I have Iowa over USC, to explain it better, is because we know what Iowa's identity is. It's on defense. And then I don't even know what USC is going to look like, Ed. Now that Caleb Williams is no longer with them, I don't know what USC is going to look like this year. Whereas Iowa at least has an identity on one side of the ball.
Okay. And so, with that being said, there is a team that you didn't mention that I will get to here in just a minute.
Let me
Um,
guess. Rutgers.
yeah, sure, Rutgers. Yeah. Um, so for me, number one, I have Ohio State. I think it is a. I'm with you as far as the roster inequivalency that is there between Ohio State and Oregon. I've watched Will Howard over the past couple of years at Kansas State, and I think he's a winner. I think he's a guy that can will his team into winning a game that needs to be won. And that may be the spark that they need to get over the top and not see ghosts when they go to play Michigan because Will Howard hasn't been part of that game. Now, that game can be overwhelming for quarterbacks that have not been in it before, but it's also an idea to not have a quarterback that has been in 3 straight losses going into that game. So I have Ohio State 1. I have Oregon number 2. Dylan Gabriel, I think he was a great pickup. Not a good pickup, a great pickup for Dan Lanning in that offense to replace Bo Nix. He's not going to be as accurate as Bo Nix was, uh, but he's going to be able to push the ball down the field a little more than what a lot of the check downs that Bo Nix was throwing. That is that is going to make them even more explosive on offense because you're not going to be able to press up and just hope that they don't run behind you. You're going to have to cover side to side, down the field, the entire field. And Dylan Gabriel's been in college football long enough that it's very much like a Bo Nix situation, but I think Dylan Gabriel is a little better at getting down the field with the ball rather than just doing a long handoff to somebody out in the flat and letting them run by everybody. So I've got Oregon number 2. Michigan, I put it number 3. And a big reason for that is the fact that, yes, it's a new coach in Sharon Moore, but the identity is still there. What they do is still there. Everything about that program is still there. The players, they've changed, but they have been one of the best developing programs in the Big Ten over the over the time that Jim Harbaugh was there, and it's just going to continue with Sharon Moore.
Mm.
Now, I will say Sharon Moore has a 1 year leniency, if you will, if we do not see the whole program continue to churn the same way it did with Jim Harbaugh, then there's going to be some questions about Sharon Moore. And that goes into the line of it's easier for a head coach to take over somebody else's program mid-season because you don't have to worry about the recruiting aspect, the fitting your roster aspect, because somebody else did that for you. This is going to be completely on him if they fall back to an 8-4 when they were national champions last year. So that's a cautious tale for me. Penn State, I just don't believe in James Franklin and Drew Aller. They 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 are stuck in neutral. They want to have a good defense, which that's James Franklin's calling card, but Manny Diaz is gone. He was the defensive coordinator. He took the job at Duke. And Drew Aller has yet to show that he can be the guy in the game. And that's a big problem I have with that offense and quite literally that defense going into this season. Number 5, I'm putting Nebraska. I'm a big
Oh.
believer in Matt Rule. I think he is going to double his win total from last
Mm.
year. They're going to go to 10-2 after going 5-7 last year. The schedule sets up beautifully for them, and getting Dylan Raiola out there to be able to actually catch a snap from center and not turn the ball over.
Mm.
I think it was something like negative 22 turnovers last year. That's ridiculous. Even if you cut it down to even, they win way more games, at least an 8-9 win record if you just cut it down to 0. I
Yeah.
think Matt Rule, as a program builder, is building a monster out there, out in the cornfield. And this year we'll see such a jump that they will be a team to reckon with going forward.
And
I,
speaking of jump, let me jump in real quick. By the way,
yeah.
I probably sound a little different because I realized my mic wasn't on. But I had totally forgotten about Nebraska. Real quick, I don't know if I will put. I'm still gonna have Iowa over Nebraska just because I think Iowa has been more proven. But I
Mhm.
will absolutely put Nebraska over USC at least. As I said, I have no idea what USC is going to look like this year, even with an offensive guru like Lincoln Riley. I don't know.
Sure, sure. And you know, I'm with you. I'll have Iowa over USC because with Lincoln Riley, I know they're going to win ball games, but I don't know if they're going to. I think they're going to score points. I'll say that they'll
Yeah.
score points. I have no idea if they'll be able to stop anybody from scoring points.
Now, in fairness, they did get that guy from UCLA, D'Anton Lynn, I think, and Lynn did turn around UCLA's defense, and he's going to have better athletes at USC. So it's like, why are I get it because defenses under Lincoln Riley usually suck, but they did get in my opinion, a proven defensive coordinator.
And that's great, but tackling is a mentality. If is he going to get a mentality into the players that have not had that mentality over the past 2 seasons?
Yeah,
That's my
sure.
question when it comes to he may be great as far as scheming, may be great as far as uh, building up the confidence of these guys, but the mentality of being able to tackle and tackle consistently, that's where we're going to see the biggest difference between the 2 years under Caleb Williams versus the year without Caleb Williams.
That's fair.
Iowa, they're going to be good on defense. Kirk Ferentz, God, he's like, oh, we're going to have a good offense. But I think I could roll a helmet out there and create a better offense than what they had last year. I mean, the biggest weapon they had on offense was the punter. It was
Yeah,
it was ridiculous.
yeah,
But just to recap, we were different on the Oregon Ohio State 1 and 2.
yep,
We're different on Michigan Penn State 3 and 4.
yep.
And are you now putting Nebraska in number 5?
Um, no, I said I had Iowa. I'm still gonna have
Okay.
Iowa over Nebraska.
Okay.
So then, just new list for me. It would be number one Oregon, number two Ohio State, number three Penn State, number four Michigan, number five Iowa, number six Nebraska, and number seven USC. But you know what's really interesting, Ed, is that like you talked before about the SEC. I mean, the fifth, sixth best team in the Big Ten is potentially still going to be a very good football team. I mean, that just shows how deeply stacked these conferences are.
Yeah, as the two spotlight conferences in college football, because behind that, you've got the ACC and the Big 12. Does anybody really believe that somebody from either one of those conferences are going to compete for a national championship? I
I
don't
think
think so.
no. I mean, I think Florida State from the ACC has the best chance, even though I think they're going to have a major drop off from quarterback with DJU. I don't think DJU is. I don't think he's necessarily bad, but I don't think he's that great either. And then with the Big 12, I mean, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, man, like that whole conference is just. I mean, we've talked before. I think the Big 12 is the worst Power Four, not Power Five, the worst Power Four conference now.
Mhm.
Because without Texas and Oklahoma, they have nobody to carry that conference now.
For this year, I don't think Florida State's the biggest contender for the playoff, making it through. I think
You're-
Utah is. I think
Wait,
you.
you in the Utah's on the ACC, unless I'm
No,
misunderstanding
I'm
what you're saying.
saying in the college football playoff,
Uh huh.
you said Florida State is the biggest chance, has the best chance out of these two, out of the SEC and Big Ten, outside
Well,
of the SEC and Big Ten.
oh, I meant that like if any team in the ACC has the best chance to win a title, it's Florida State.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm saying the I don't think that Florida State has the best chance outside of SEC and Big Ten to win the national championship. I think it's Utah.
Hmm. I mean, Cam Rising is there for his 35th season, so yeah.
But the identity that beat up the conference that was the Pac-12, and with the influx into the Big 12, being able to be the flagship of the Big 12 going into this season, I think is going to prove dividends for them. And they're going to get a favorable seed in the
Mhm.
playoffs, and it's going to work out well for them. So that's why I think Utah has a better shot of going deeper into a playoff format than what Florida State does.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that overall Utah has a better chance than Florida State, and I think we're also probably in agreement that of all the teams in the ACC, Florida State has the best chance. But overall, yes, Utah does have a better chance than Florida State.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
definitely. And you talked about Cam Rising being there for his 35th year. Well, there are some players that actually want to go and play in the NFL. And we're going to talk about a couple of the divisions where those players are sitting right now,
Hmm.
because we've talked about on this show last season how the AFC North was the absolute best division in football
Every
in
team had a winning record. Yeah.
the NFL, and that's the first time that has ever happened. Now, granted, it helps having a 17 game season, so there's not 8-8 across the board,
Yeah.
but it's still quite an impressive feat. But I've got to ask you, David, is the NFC North going to challenge the AFC North for the best division in football?
I think it has the potential, Ed, for sure. But I also think it depends on what you're looking for. Like, is your flavor more on offense or is it more on defense? And I think, overall, the identity for the NFC North is, more on the offensive side, whereas I feel like the identity from the AFC North is more on the defensive side. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, especially considering that Cleveland had a historic defense last year,
Hmm.
as well as uh, the Ravens. Their calling card as an organization is on defense,
Yeah.
whereas with the NFC North, there there's been a lot said about the Lions offense. There's been a lot said about the Packers offense. Before Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson were hurt last year, there was talk about the Vikings offense. And then you've got the Bears just being the Bears, I guess. Now, the question when it comes to that, though, the triggerman for each division, I think, is a great quarterback room when you add them together.
Hmm.
In the NFC North, you've got Jordan Love, Jared Goff, JJ McCarthy now, and Caleb Williams. The last two being rookies, not as seasoned. We'll see how that pans out. In the AFC North, you've got Lamar Jackson, you've got Deshaun Watson, you've got Joe Burrow, and I'm going to pencil in Justin Fields because eventually it will be his team. I don't think anybody has any qualms about that being the case. Do you?
No, I think I think Russell Wilson is gonna start off as the starter, but yeah, I agree that I think Fields will take over the starter, eventually. And when you're comparing quarterback rooms between these two divisions, Ed, I'm gonna take the NFC North because Jordan Love and Jared Goff are proven guys, and then JJ McCarthy and Caleb Williams have to prove themselves, but they certainly have the potential. Caleb Williams, especially. Whereas I look at the AFC North, Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson are proven, but Deshaun Watson and Justin Fields are washed. So you're looking at two divisions here where both of them have at least two quarterbacks that are proven, but the difference is that one division has two quarterbacks who have the potential to become great, and then you have another division where the two quarterbacks are just not what they used to be. I mean, Justin Fields especially has just never really panned out. I mean, I know he's been an excellent rusher as a quarterback, but he has certainly not panned out the way that we all thought he was going to be.
I'm actually going to take the AFC North on this one. Even though we expect the offenses in the NFC North to be more dynamic and explosive and all that kind of stuff. The the NFC North doesn't have a two-time MVP in its quarterback room. Uh, you've got Deshaun Watson, who was an MVP candidate when he was in Houston. Are we just going to wash away everything that he accomplished in Houston
But I think that's
because
also well, that's also asking is, do we really expect him to be the same guy he was in Houston? Because ever since signing that mega deal for the Browns, I mean, he's only played 12 games the past 2 seasons combined.
true, but that wasn't necessarily because he wasn't capable of playing. It's partly because of the issues that he's had off the field. If what we do here is we talk about ball, we're not talking about a lot of the other stuff uh, outside of the world of sports. So for his talent, Deshaun Watson with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow by themselves beat the NFC North hands down. With Justin Fields, he to me he's still unproven because the offense that they were running in Chicago while he was there was basically chuck and duck. As far as a passing game, it was hike, time to go, and that was really the offense as they went through the season, and it proved to be successful for them when it worked. The problem is it didn't work all the time because teams started keying in on the fact that nobody was able to catch the ball because Fields was inaccurate. That's
Hmm.
the number one thing that I find with Justin Fields that is going to delay him taking over the Steelers is the fact that he's inaccurate as a passer, but I also put his inaccuracy partly on the fact that he was running for his life for 17 games last year.
Ed, let me ask you this. Now, the Bears are never going to admit this, but do you think they purposely sabotage the offense for Fields so that they can move on from him to Caleb Williams?
They're never going to say it out loud, but I think when they saw that the option was there, they were so enamored by the next big quarterback that they gave up on Fields. I'm not going to say they sabotaged him. I'm going to say that they gave up on him before the season was over. And that is unfortunate for somebody that has that kind of talent
Hmm.
because if you if he can if he can develop under Arthur Smith, then we are going to see a totally different quarterback than what we saw in Chicago. And it's going to make the Bears livid that they did not hang on to him,
Are we?
especially uh,
Sorry.
espe- especially if Caleb Williams winds up going down that same path. If they go 2 years, 2 to 3 years under Caleb Williams, and cannot figure out how to use him appropriately, guess what they're going to do? They're going to go get Arch Manning in the draft of that year. So that's just the repeated cycle when it comes to the Chicago Bears as an organization.
Are we talking about the same Arthur Smith whose best accomplishment was just giving Derrick Henry the ball a million times every game and who was a horrible offensive coach for the Falcons? That same Arthur Smith?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, one, I actually did not know that Arthur Smith, he's the offensive coordinator for the Bears now.
He's the offensive coordinator for the Steelers now.
Okay. I must. Oh, okay. Then I misheard everything that you said. I misunderstood what you said then.
No worries. Yeah, Arthur Smith is now the offensive coordinator for the Steelers, uh, and is tasked with developing Justin Fields to take
Mm,
over that offense.
okay, gotcha.
You know, but when it comes to looking at the players in these divisions, it isn't just the quarterbacks. It's also who are they throwing to? Which which division would you say, David, has a better wide receiver and skill position room?
Ooh. when I look at it, Ed, you know what? I'm gonna say the NFC North.
Okay.
When you got guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore, and who's the guy from the Packers?
Well, it's a collection of diaper dandies
Yes.
because the Packers themselves are aiming to be the youngest team in the league for a second year in a row.
Yeah.
They got younger after last season. So that's what we're looking at on that. I mean, as far as actual players that you're talking about Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, Wicks. You're talking about Josh Jacobs
Who
just
was your
came
lead,
in.
who was your leading receiver last year? Was it
Leading
Wicks?
receiver last year was Romeo Dobbs.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Now, also, Ed, when you're talking about the best wide receiver rooms in these divisions, when I look at the NFC North, so the way that I rank wide receiver rooms is one of the things that I look at, Ed, is that who is the quarterback throwing to them, because how good a receiver is depends a lot on how good the quarterback is. And I think Jared Goff is the best quarterback in the NFC North, and that's why I have the Lions wide receiver room. I think they have the best wide receiver room in the NFC North, primarily because of who they have at quarterback, and also Amon-Ra St. Brown is a stud, to be fair. But yeah,
So is Laporta. He
true.
is he is definitely a stud, and he proved that throughout his rookie season last year. Uh, as far as going into individual rooms, I'm with you that Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta, uh, they have proven themselves and get a few more headlines, but I think a better collection of talent, whether it be fully realized or not yet, is still in Green Bay. Uh, they have. I just listed off five different guys. How many other teams can you list off five different guys that are young, they have talent, and they are developing right before our eyes each and every week? I don't know if there's another team in the NFL that you can say that with. They are completely interchangeable. And I didn't even get to the tight end room, which is Tucker Kraft and Degura,
Mhm.
which uh, that just adds two more names to that list. And the great thing about it is the quarterback is making these receivers better. In Goff's case, I've I mentioned this on our last show when I was speaking with Matthew. At some point, are the wide receivers making Goff better? Is Amon-Ra St. Brown making Goff look better than he actually is because he's that good himself? I'm asking.
No, I think. Well, I'm not saying no, definitely not. But I definitely get what you're saying, Ed. But I also think you have to consider the fact that Jared Goff has been a stud in Detroit from day one. Day one in Detroit. Even if you want to argue that the talent around him makes him better, you cannot deny how good Jared Goff has been since coming to Detroit. And even though his time in with the Rams ended kind of unceremoniously, he was still a fairly decent player, for the Rams. He still put up, pretty good numbers. So it's not like his resurgence, if you want to call it that, bless you, with the Bears, or not the
Thank you.
Bears. It's not like his resurgence with the Lions has been entirely surprising, because he did have some decent numbers when he was with the Rams. But overall, I do get what you're saying, and then I also get what you're saying as far as the Packers wide receiver room being number one. But Ed, I have them at number four, and it's just, and you know what, it's pretty much going to be the opposite of what you say, or just the opposite of what you agree. In that, to me, I talk about how a wide receiver is good a lot of times depending on the quarterback, but I think also I think a basic benchmark that a wide receiver room needs to meet is that they need to have it needs to have a receiver, at least one receiver who has 1,000 yards. Now I understand, um, the argument against that is that Jordan Love just spread the love all around the offense. So I totally get that, but numbers are still numbers, and I
Mhm.
think I I cannot put your room at number one if you don't have a wide receiver with 1,000 yards. Even though I do understand why that is the case in Green Bay.
And that's a fair point. I mean, you have to show it, through the numbers that you accumulate th- throughout an entire season. Our number one wide receiver is actually Christian Watson, but he's been hurt the past 2 years. So we've had to have these other wide receivers step up. But in doing so, it's just made that room that much better. And when Christian Watson comes back in, it's just adding another fire to the spark plug. And that's part of the reason why I say that, because you can't, in my mind, rely on just one player to be your entire receiving, uh, your spark,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. Like in Minnesota, you've got Justin Jefferson, but who else is on that team?
Jordan Addison, and that one dude.
Yeah, exactly. So outside of Justin Jefferson, they're kind of piecemealing it together. Whereas if you take a piece out of the Packers wide receiver room, the train just keeps moving forward. And that's one thing that I look for as far as a total wide receiver room or skill position collection is, if you lose a piece, how effed are you going
Mhm.
forward? And the Vikings found out last year. They FAFO'd. Uh, you lose Justin Jefferson, and then all of a sudden you wind up losing your quarterback. You you're out. It was simple as that. Um, as far as the rooms in the AFC North, you've got your Jamar Chase. And your so Cincinnati to me is number one
I
when it
have.
comes to that.
I also have them number one, Ed.
Yeah, uh, and then number two, you've got to have Baltimore, in my mind,
I actually have
especially
Baltimore.
especially with the addition of Derrick Henry.
Well, I actually have Baltimore number four, Ed. And I'm not saying they're bad. They're obviously not bad, but they're a running team with Lamar Jackson. How can I put it? I just, for me, I don't see why I can put it. I don't see why I have to put a team at number two when their whole identity is, run first.
Well, they do a lot of play action off that run. I mean, they're more down the field passing because they run the ball enough, and with Derrick Henry, that's just going to get better. I I can't wait to see what that actually looks like on the field.
Mm.
Uh, and then, are you putting the Steelers at number three?
Yes, I have the Steelers at number three.
Okay, so that's going to mean that you have the Browns at number four. No, at number two.
I have the Browns at number two. Man, I think people forget just how good of a receiver Amari Cooper is. He doesn't really get talked about a lot, but that dude's a stud.
He's a stud, and people talked about him a lot more when he was on a higher profile team that was on the
Yeah,
game of the week every single week. You
yeah.
know, as a program that I was watching earlier today, they're like,
Hmm.
you know, we might deviate from the norm and talk about the Cowboys this year. Let's see how it works for the ratings. Yeah,
But
and that's exactly what Amari Cooper came from. So
yeah,
that's how we know about Amari Cooper now. Ever since he left the Raiders, going
hmm,
to the Cowboys. Since he left the Cowboys,
yeah.
the
But
Browns are kind of a place where talent goes to be obscured.
Yeah, for sure. But you know what I find interesting, Ed? Like I love the fact that both of our philosophies in ranking these wide receiver rooms are completely different. Whereas for me, I'm looking at the wide receiver rooms who have that one stud, receiver. Whereas you're looking at the rooms that are just like a well-oiled machine all around. And I think both are valid points. They're different points of view, but they're both valid points.
Yeah, it's just a different way of running an organization or running a team. So and these are part of the reasons why we have conversations and debates and everything like we're doing right now. So uh, let's keep it moving and talk about the defenses of uh, the two divisions. We've already said it that the AFC North, their calling card is the defense. So I think we're both in agreement that we don't really need to get too deep into the woods here, uh, as far as saying the AFC North has a very deep defensive mindset, whereas the NFC North, they're kind of a bend but don't break as a collection, uh, as far as defenses are concerned. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's no debate here, Ed, whatsoever. I mean, AFC North, hands down, best defensive division, at least between these two divisions. I mean, the Ravens and the Browns had two of the best defenses last year. The Steelers are always above average, too good, on defense. The Steelers are never going to be bad on defense, and then I don't remember how the Bengals did on defense, but even so, Ed, like you're looking at three of the four teams in one division that were very good defensively last year.
Absolutely. And there's like you said, there really is no debate about it. So I I think we've kind of gone through each one of the main points here. Who are you going to give the edge to?
Like individually, or but
Between the two divisions,
as far as defense goes, the AFC
as
North.
far
Man.
as the whole, we've done each of the points
Oh,
as a whole. Who are you putting as the better division?
okay. I see what you're saying now. Oh gosh. You know what, Ed? I'm gonna say the AFC North. And the reason why I say that is because like I know it's not last year anymore, but last year does carry some weight, and they were the only division to have in which every single team um, had a winning record, and I don't think they're going to. I don't see them, getting worse. I think the Bengals should bounce back. I think the Ravens, especially with the addition of Derrick Henry, they're going to be great. I think the Browns will still do decent, and the Steelers. Listen, man, the Steelers are never going to have another losing season again. So I'm going to take the AFC. Yeah. So even with all that said, I'm going to take the AFC North as the better division over the NFC North.
Well, my pick on this is drum roll, please. The AFC North,
Shocker.
and not to say that the NFC North can't wind up being better than the AFC North, but you still have two teams with rookie quarterbacks, and that's just too much to overcome as far as hierarchy when it comes to ranking these different divisions. So I'm going to go AFC North because there is consistency, there is uh, a defensive mindset, there is a toughness about that division that we are not seeing out of the NFC North just yet. We're almost there. We're getting there, but we haven't shown up just yet. So I'm going to go with you. I'm agreeing with you on that. The AFC North is going to be the number one division in the NFL as of this year. Um, and just like that, everybody, I appreciate you hanging out. This has been a great time talking with you. And uh, and please like, subscribe, tell your friends, comment on our videos. We appreciate it all. We want to hear from you so we know what to talk about next. And until next time, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.